Center field on fire, an umpire's life with pine tar bats, spitballs, and cork personalities. It's the story of one of baseball's most respected umpires. Dave Phillips has seen it all throughout a remarkable 32-year career umpiring in the major leagues. Few people have been involved in as many historic, controversial, and just plain strange incidents on a baseball diamond. Joining us on the program to talk about some of his experiences in the book is Dave Phillips. And Dave, thanks for spending a few minutes with us this morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great, thank you.
I read the book last night, Dave, and it is just filled with some fascinating behind-the-scenes stories that I think any baseball fan would love. One of the reasons I think people should enjoy this book, it gives a unique perspective from an umpire's point of view, and I don't think it's been done before. Is that right? You're the first umpire to write a book like this?
Well, not really. I think Ron Luciano wrote a couple. He was pretty successful with his. His was a little bit more humorous and of that kind of a book, but this has been a fun experience for me. I didn't have any expectations when we started it, but it's turned out to be a real neat project, and I think it's a fun read.
What was it like writing the book? You recall some of the great stories of dealing with a lot of the great personalities. What was your process like in writing it?
Well, I started off with just chatting with Rob Raines, who did a marvelous job of taking my verbal stories and putting them into words. Sometimes you're always concerned of whether or not, a lot of times I do speaking engagements, and that's what precipitated this, was the fact that a lot of people thought I had some unbelievable funny stories, how to put them in a book, and you always worry about getting it from the verbal side onto the written side and see if it still comes across the way you want it to, and I feel very good about that. He did a nice job.
It really feels like you're talking to the reader through it. That's the impression I got just reading through the book, which is a difficult thing to do when you're writing.
Yeah, it was, as I said, it was a fun project. There's a lot of funny stories. I guess people have referred to me as Forrest Gump. I've either was in the right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time. I'm not sure which. But, a lot of things happened throughout my career, and we talked about a lot of them in the book.
You worked your way up through the minors. Your dad was an umpire. Talk a little bit about the difficulties of actually becoming a major league umpire. It's not an easy path to take.
Well, becoming a major league umpire is certainly something that I highly recommend for anybody that would like to choose to pursue that profession. But it is a very difficult task. I mean, to get a job in the major leagues, basically, there's a lot of things you have to do. But first of all, you have to have somebody die, retire, get fired for an opening to be created. And if that happens, of course, you got to work yourself up through the minor leagues. You pretty much got to be rated as, I would suspect, the best umpire in every league that you work in to consider to be moved up. So the job is very, very competitive and very, very difficult to get to the major leagues, but I certainly had a wonderful career of 32 years in the major leagues.
Incredible career. You've seen so many unusual things in your 32 years. You talk a lot about that in the book. We'll get to some of that in a minute. But really the only way to become an umpire, you have to go to one or two different umpiring schools. Is that right? One in Florida?
Yeah, there's two umpiring schools in Florida. One is the Jim Evans umpiring school, and the other one is the Harry Windelstead umpiring school. And they're both 6-week courses. They go over everything: ball strikes, safe out, fair fouls, all the rules, all the interpretations. And, of course, they rate and evaluate you on a regular basis. And after the school's over, if you're good enough, you're selected to go to accelerated camp, and then from there they select you to go in the rookie leagues, and so on. Then you start your quest to become a major league umpire by working your way up through the minor leagues.
Usually start the A-League, like you said, then you started out in the Midwest, right?
Mm-hmm. I started in the Midwest League, and I went to the Texas League, and then the International League. Took me 7 years, and as I say, I was very fortunate. I came to the big leagues as one of the youngest umpires in the history of Major League Baseball at that time, and I was somewhat of a guinea pig. At that time, they had not considered umpires until they were 30, 33, 34 years old, and they took a chance with some of us younger guys, and in doing so, it created more longevity for umpiring and umpiring careers.
You talk about the first day you pulled into umpire training school, and you were almost tempted to drive away. What kind of personality do you need to really become an ump? Because it's not an easy thing to deal with. You're always dealing with people yelling at you.
Well, I came down to Florida, and I was a young 20-year-old going to an umpiring school, and had all the vim and vigor until I got down there, and I had, I guess, a lot of the same insecurities that anybody else would have pursuing something that is unknown, and I didn't know what the competition was going to be like. And I sat out in front of the umpiring school, as I said in the book, for, I guess, 15, 20 minutes thinking, did I really want to go in there? And when I went in there, I found to be the case, as most cases happen, that everybody else in there was in the same insecure feeling that I had. No one knew what to expect, and so consequently I fit in very well, and we went through the 6-week course, became good friends with some of the guys, and some of them are still friends of mine today.
Dave Phillips joined us on the program, Center Field on Fire. It's published by Triumph Books. Lots of great personalities. You have some wonderful stories about. Maybe just a few words on each. I'll throw out a name to you. Earl Weaver.
Oh, he's a difficult manager, highly competitive, and I guess he called me everything but my first name at times, too.
Dick Williams. You had some interesting stories about him.
Well,
he was a prickly guy to deal with.
He was a miserable human being, to put it very bluntly. He was probably the most disliked person in the major leagues in my career, from not only the umpiring standpoint, but a lot of the players didn't like him as well. He's just a difficult guy to deal with, and I always thought he was one of the highlights of my career. Highlight being the fact that when he was in the American League, he signed a long-term contract to manage in the National League. So when he went over to the National League, that was certainly a highlight for me. So he got out of our league.
And Billy Martin was another guy.
I thought Billy was probably the best manager I had in my career. He was a talented manager. For any 2-year period, there was no better manager in the league for any team. But after the 2-year period, it seemed like he always self-destructed, whether for whatever reason, and then he would move on to a different team. But really a talented person and a very knowledgeable guy between the white lines.
Really was a great tactician of the game. Had also, unfortunately, the personal problems that ended in his untimely death early on. But he was a great tactician in the managerial box.
He truly was, yes.
He really was. Some of the great moments you've seen on the diamond. Obviously, you umped the Pine Tar makeup game, and tell a little bit about that story.
Well, the interesting part, George Brett was called out for having too much pine tar in his bat. Of course, the Royals went crazy in that situation, protested the game, and Lee McPhail upheld the protest, and he made him play the game from the time when George Brett hit the home run. Well, I was in Seattle when the first game was played, and when they made the makeup game starting in the 9th inning, as though George Brett had just hit the home run, that's when we started the game up again. And when we started the game up, George Frazier was pitching for the Yankees. He got finished with his warm-up pitches, immediately turned around and threw it to second base. Willie Randolph caught the ball, tagged second, and he looked at me and he said, "Dave," he says, "George Brett missed second base 2 months ago." Well, I laughed at him, and I was fortunate that the American League had heard some rumors that Billy might do this, and therefore they had me armed with an affidavit which stated that not only did George Brett touch first, second, third, and home respectively, but he did so in order and legally, and therefore, even though I wasn't there, the umpires had signed it and had it notarized by a notary public, and then also with a judge signing it. So it was kind of funny. I remember showing Billy the affidavit on the field. There's a famous picture. It's in the book, in fact.
Yeah.
He looked at me and he says, "Well, it's an aff a freaking what?" And he didn't quite say it that way, but that's about what he meant. And then I told him, and he said, "Well, I'll be an SOB," and walked away, and that was the end of it. We had a 4-hour game, and it was over.
Our guest is Dave Phillips. Can you hang on just for about 2 minutes? I want to ask you a couple more questions about baseball. We're going to take a short break. Waking up.
I am having a real good time.
AM 1220.
And we're talking with Dave Phillips, one of the most respected umpires in Major League Baseball history. The name of the book is Center Field on Fire, and it's published by Triumph Books. And Dave, as I mentioned before, just reading the book last night, you touch on a lot of the important issues of baseball. You talk about a little about steroids and the Richie Phillips resignation strategy. We don't have time to really get into that now, but just a couple of words on your feelings on the state of baseball right now.
Oh, I think the baseball is obviously still my favorite pastime. I think that it's got some problems. They need to address some, steroids being one of them. I think the competitive balance is an important issue. They've tried to address it in some fashion, but in reality, until they get something that's close to salary cap, it's not going to be a competitive balance. I mean, there's still the Yankees and still the Red Sox and the Los Angeles Dodgers and the big market teams are still going to be there year after year. Maybe one might be a different team, but it'll still be those teams. The other teams always have to do a lesser role in the competitive balance. So they're going to have to address a lot of issues along those lines.
Yeah, definitely we'll have to do something because the salaries are just totally out of whack. You have the aberration like the Marlins winning, but look at the other teams that were in the playoffs. It's all the high market, high payroll teams.
Well, you got to get it to the point when teams leave spring training that they have a reasonable feeling that there's a possibility of being competitive and also winning. And right now there's 20 teams, 25 teams every year that leave spring training, no chance of winning, and they know full well that that's not going to be the case unless they just happen to strike lightning or something unbelievably happens. Steroids is another issue. Baseball has to rid themselves of, no different than football has and the Olympics has. They're doing it right. Baseball needs to step up, and the Players Association has to be partners in that issue. They're representing their players, but by the same token, their players are people that are going to grow up and as they get older have some real significant health problems, and they need to address that as well.
Absolutely. What have you been doing since retiring?
Well, I mean, it's very easy for me to retire. I had 3 knee surgeries, and I couldn't run any longer, and by gosh, they never did think I could see, so you can't see and you can't run. By gosh, it's time to maybe consider. But I've been enjoying myself, spent some time with my grandkids, been at home, did a little traveling by my choice rather than having to be someplace, and I do a radio show on KMOX and a book course.
Oh, yeah, St. Louis.
Rather busy.
Yeah, in St. Louis.
Yeah, I live in St. Louis, and we have a 2-hour radio show after the Cardinal game every Sunday. It's called Baseball Sunday, and it's kind of an interesting, fun call-in type show. And I've enjoyed that aspect of it. And as I say, the book, with Father's Day coming up, it's been really, really busy with a lot of people wanting to get something for their father, and they think this would be a funny book, and it has been. It's been a good book for them.
Make a great gift. Centerfield on Fire, published by Triumph Books. We've been talking with Dave Phillips, and it's been a pleasure to spend a couple of minutes with you, Dave. Hopefully we'll do it again down the road.
Doug, I thank you for having me, and you guys have a great day, and I'll be down in Florida not too far from now.
Yeah, maybe next spring training we'll have you stop by the station here in Sarasota.
I would love it.